Welcome to this deep dive. We're pulling out the key insights from a whole stack of sources today.
Yeah, and all of today's material actually comes from the recent QBITS event. The theme was Beyond.
Right, beyond. This is, what, episode 5 of our QBITS Quick Bits series?
That's the one. We're sharing the main takeaways, and that whole Beyond theme was really about helping IT leaders like you listening to, move past the traditional IT box.
To take on more strategic roles.
Exactly. More impact in the organization.
And today's focus is absolutely core to that strategic thinking. Security.
Mm-hmm. It's unavoidable. No longer just an IT department issue.
Yeah.
It's fundamental business risk now.
It really is. So our mission here is to unpack what came out of the QBITS sessions on security.
Yep. Give you a quick handle on the current threat landscape and how strategies are evolving, straight from the event.
Okay, sounds good. We've got quite a bit to cover. Threat trends, ransomware stuff, NIST changes, MDR 2.0.
Yeah, it's a snapshot of where security is right now and, frankly, where it needs to go.
So where should we jump in first? How about that threat landscape? What are the sources saying the bad actors are actually doing?
Well, no big surprise. Ransomware is still the big headline threat.
Still dominant.
Very much so. The sources really hammered home how significant and pervasive it is, and critical infrastructure is getting hit hard.
Which has huge knock-on effects, obviously.
Massive. But it's not just the old style of attack anymore. The tactics are getting much sneakier.
Right, I picked that up too. They're not just barging in the door.
No, a really big theme was dwell time. They're staying inside environments for much, much longer before, pulling the trigger.
How long are we talking?
Potentially hundreds of days. Think about that. Months to map everything out, find the crown jewels, learn your operations.
And doing it quietly, presumably?
Yeah.
How do they stay hidden that long?
By blending in. That's the key. They use tools that are probably already running in your environment.
Ah, the living off the land technique.
Exactly. Things like PowerShell, rclone, standard admin tools. Sometimes they even throttle their own bandwidth when they're pulling data out just to avoid setting off alarms.
Wow. So they mimic legitimate activity, like malicious insiders.
Pretty much. The sources laid out the process. Start with basic recon, like ping sweeps, port scans, just seeing what's there.
Then steal credentials.
Yeah, and apparently that can be surprisingly easy, sometimes just scraping them right out of web browsers on machines they've already compromised.
And once they have credentials?
They can move laterally, explore the network, find more valuable targets.
And it sounds like it's easier for more attackers to get into this game now, too.
Yeah.
That ransomware is a service model.
Yeah, that's definitely a worrying trend. As platforms are getting more sophisticated, putting advanced tools into the hands of people who couldn't build them themselves.
So it lowers the bar for entry.
It broadens the threat landscape considerably, yes.
And the actual attack, when it comes. It's more than just locking files now.
Oh, absolutely. It's what they called ransomware plus. And that almost always means data exfiltration first.
They steal your data before they encrypt.
Right. So even if you have perfect backups, maybe immutable ones, and you think, okay, I can recover.
They've still got your sensitive information.
Exactly. And they will use it. The extortion tactics are really escalating. It's multi-level pressure.
What does that look like?
Beyond just threatening to leak the data, we heard about harassment campaigns, targeting employees directly, using DDoS attacks to disrupt things further.
Seriously, harassing employees.
Yeah. And in the most extreme cases, even stuff like swatting, making fake emergency calls, or targeting family members, they're using call centers, maybe even deepfakes, to make it incredibly personal. Terrifying.
That's a whole other level of psychological pressure. Did the sources mention specific data types they value most?
They did. Data from places like schools, universities, healthcare was mentioned as highly leverageable.
Because of the sensitivity?
Absolutely. Information on minors, health records, financial aid data, learning disabilities. Leaking that stuff causes immense reputational damage, huge legal exposure. It puts enormous pressure on organizations to pay up.
Okay, so threats are stealthier, smarter, more widely available, and the tactics are getting, frankly, quite nasty.
That sums it up pretty well. It's a tough picture.
So how are defenses keeping up? What are the advanced strategies emerging?
Right. This is where we move beyond just detection. And AI is playing a massive role.
Okay, AI and security. How is it actually changing things on the ground for, say, a SOC team?
Well, it's fundamentally boosting what they can do. AI can process and correlate just vast amounts of data from logs, endpoints, network traffic, way faster than humans.
Finding patterns we'd miss.
Exactly. Identifying subtle anomalies, those hidden threats that don't match a known bad signature. It's crucial for spotting those living off the land attacks we talked about.
In automation.
Big time. Automating things like initial threat hunting, sifting through alerts, it frees up the human analysts to focus on the really complex investigations, the stuff that needs intuition.
Makes sense. Let the machines do the grunt work.
Precisely. And this leads us nicely into the evolution of MDR, managed detection and response.
Right, MDR. But the sources we're talking about, MDR 2.0, what's the difference? Was the 2.0 part?
Okay, think of MDR 1.0 as mostly being about detection and then, alerting you, hey, we found something. Then it was kind of over to your team to handle it.
Right, the response was largely manual.
Yeah. MDR 2.0 is much more focused on automation and, crucially, proactive neutralization. The goal is to shut the attack down before real damage happens.
How fast are we talking?
One example quoted speeds like 38 seconds from detection to active response, like isolating a machine.
38 seconds. That's
What?
incredibly fast. That could make all the difference.
It really could. And a key technology enabling that kind of speed and intelligence is UEBA, User and Entity Behavioral Analytics.
UEVA. What's a specific role?
So UEBA uses AI to learn what's normal for every user and every device, every entity on your network. It builds this behavioral baseline, like a fingerprint.
Okay, so it knows how people and things usually operate.
Exactly. So if, say, an admin account that only ever logs in during business hours from the main office suddenly logs in at 3 a.m. from, I don't know, somewhere overseas and starts trying to access files it never touches.
UEBA flags that as weird, even if it's not using known malware.
Precisely. It's not just looking for known bad signatures, it's looking for anomalous behavior. That's key for catching novel threats or insider misuse, and it helps dramatically cut down on false positive alerts too.
So it understands context, not just isolated events. That makes sense. Now, MDR looks at logs, behavior. What about the endpoints themselves? Is EDR still critical?
Oh, absolutely. Endpoint detection and response is still foundational. You can't rely just on network or log analysis.
Why is that?
EDR is really your best bet for catching things like fileless malware.
Yeah.
That's malicious code that executes entirely in memory and never actually writes a file to the hard disk.
So traditional antivirus might miss it completely.
It often does. EDR watches the processes, the memory, the system calls on the endpoint at a much deeper level. For a really effective strategy, your EDR and your MDR need to talk to each other. They need to be integrated.
Sharing information back and forth instantly.
Yes. And speaking of endpoint tech, there was one specific capability mentioned that sounded pretty cool.
What is that?
Endpoint protection software that can actually roll back ransomware encryption right there on the affected machine.
Without needing to pull from backups.
Right. It's like a localized undo button for the encryption process. It's a powerful last line of defense on the device itself, though it was noted only a few vendors really offer that effectively right now.
Still, that's a really interesting development, and it highlights that wider point about integration, doesn't it?
Totally. Your whole security stack needs to work together. Endpoint talks to firewall, email security shares intel with network sensors, threat intelligence feeds automatically update block lists on firewalls.
It's like a coordinated immune system response.
That's a good way to put it. And having external help, like a good managed security service provider, an MSSP, especially one leveraging these MDR 2.0 capabilities, that can make a huge difference in speed.
How much difference?
Well, that 38-minute average remediation time figure came up again in the context of strong MSSPs. Compare that to hours or even days if you're trying to handle it all internally without that scale or automation. The business impact difference is enormous.
38 minutes versus days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's compelling. Okay, so we've got smarter tools, AI integration, faster response partners. But sometimes things still go wrong.
Unfortunately, yes. No defense is perfect.
And the sources really dug into the messy reality of what happens next. Ransomware negotiation.
They did. It's become this incredibly complex, high-stakes strategic game and often agonizing for the victims.
If you find yourself in that awful situation, what's the very first thing you need to figure out?
Assessment. Immediate, honest assessment. What are your real recovery options? Do those backups actually work? Have you tested them? How sensitive is the data they stole? PII, PHI, financials, trade secrets.
And containment, right? Are they still active in the network?
Critical question. Are they still in the house? Because if they are, they could be doing more damage, encrypting more, stealing more. While you're trying to figure things out, you need to know the containment status.
So negotiation isn't always about deciding whether to pay or not.
Not necessarily, no. Sometimes negotiation is purely a tactic to buy time. You might engage with the attackers, maybe even do what's some called fake negotiation, just to stall them.
While your teams are scrambling behind the scenes.
Exactly. Trying to restore from backups, trying to fully contain the breach, trying to understand the scope. Time is critical.
And cyber insurance plays a big role here, but it's not automatic coverage.
Definitely not automatic. It's crucial for managing the financial fallout, obviously, but insurers have really tightened things up. They look closely at your preparedness.
Did you actually have the controls you said you had, like MFA?
Precisely. Did you implement multi-factor authentication everywhere you claimed? Did you follow their required incident response protocols? If you didn't meet the policy requirements, they can, and sometimes do, deny the claim.
And the ethics of paying. That's always a tough one.
Hugely complex. Law enforcement strongly advises against it. You're funding criminals. But the sources acknowledge the business reality. Sometimes paying the ransom might genuinely be seen as the fastest, maybe even cheapest way to get the business operational again.
But if you do consider paying,
compliance is non-negotiable. You absolutely have to perform checks to make sure you're not paying an entity that's on a government sanctions list. The penalties for that can be severe, separate from the ransom itself.
You mentioned something surprising about the attackers, that some operate like a business.
Yeah, it sounds weird, but especially with the more established RAS groups and their affiliates, there's a sort of professionalism. They have a reputation to maintain in the cybercrime underworld. Meaning, they might actually provide a working decryption key sometimes with decent tech support, believe it or not. They might offer proof that they've deleted the data they stole. Some even give you a report on how they got in, like a perverse pen test report.
That is bizarre, like twisted customer service.
It is. But, and this is a huge but, you absolutely cannot rely on that. Bad outcomes are common. We heard one example where a company paid a hefty ransom, and the decryptor they got back corrupted all their files. So, money gone, data still gone. Double disaster.
So paying is always a gamble. And even if you pay and get a working decryptor, what about the long term?
Well, paying might allow you to get cyber insurance coverage again if you lost it or couldn't get it before, but expect much higher premiums and very strict demands from the insurer about beefing up your security controls afterward.
And the stolen data.
Yeah.
Even if they promise deletion.
You can never be 100% sure. You're essentially paying for data deletion and suppression, as they put it, paying to reduce the risk of it being leaked or sold. But you have to accept there's a residual risk they kept a copy or sold it before deleting it.
That's, yeah, incredibly sobering. So, moving beyond the immediate firefight, what's the bigger picture? How do organizations build true, lasting defense?
That brings us to the concept of cyber resilience. It's a term that came up a lot.
Resilience meaning?
Meaning the ability to keep delivering your essential business outcomes even when you're facing cyber challenges, like a major attack. It's about absorbing the hit and continuing to function.
And this idea is getting baked into the big frameworks now.
It is. The evolution of things like the NIST Cybersecurity Framework CSF 2.0 is a prime example. It really elevates the conversation.
What's the key change in NIST CSF 2.0 that shows this shift?
The big one is the addition of a whole new top-level function, govern. Yeah. It's all about embedding cybersecurity risk management into the highest levels of the organization, the C-suite, the board, and making it part of the overall governance structure. It explicitly moves security beyond being just an IT function.
So security becomes part of the core business strategy discussion.
That's the goal. It emphasizes understanding your organizational context. Why are we protecting things? What's our mission? Who depends on us? What are our critical services? That why has to drive the security decisions, not just a checklist of controls.
And it's not a one-and-done thing, right? These frameworks assume ongoing effort.
Absolutely. Continuous improvement is baked right in. Cybersecurity is a journey, always evolving. NIST helps with this in 2.0 by providing lots of implementation examples, practical ways specific controls might look in different types of organizations. It makes it less abstract.
So adopting something like NIST CSF 2.0 seems like a really concrete way for IT leaders to demonstrate that strategic value, to go beyond just the tech.
It absolutely is. It's about connecting security directly to business goals and risks.
Okay. And underlying all the tech, all the frameworks, there's still the human factor, preparedness.
Crucial. This was another recurring theme. You can have the best tools, but if you don't have clear processes, documented playbooks, and actual practice.
Muscle memory.
Exactly. You need that muscle memory. Running incident response drills, like fire drills, is so important. So when the pressure is immense and people are maybe panicking, they know their roles, they know what to do.
Because it's never just the security team responding, is it?
Never. Effective response involves legal, forensics partners, recovery specialists, PR, communications, your insurance carrier, senior management. Everyone needs a defined role in the plan before the crisis hits.
And finally, the most basic layer, training your actual employees.
Can't forget it. It's non-negotiable. Regular, effective cybersecurity awareness training, and it needs to keep pace. Phishing simulations need to be sophisticated because the real attacks certainly are. The human element is still, so often, the initial entry point.
So quite a journey we've taken there, pulling all those threads from the QBITS sources.
Yeah, we've covered the changing threats, getting stealthier, using psychology. We looked at advanced defenses, AI, MDR 2.0, UEBA, integration. We dove into the tough realities of ransomware negotiation, and then the strategic view resilience, governance with NIST CSF 2.0, and that essential human preparedness.
It really paints a picture of how cybersecurity leadership today truly has to go beyond the traditional technical scope.
Definitely. It's business risk, it's negotiation, it's governance, it's organizational resilience. It touches everything.
Okay, so considering how fast everything is moving, the threats, the tech, and how high the stakes are getting, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. As an IT leader aiming for that strategic impact, how can you best translate these really complex security challenges and these sophisticated defense solutions into clear, compelling priorities that actually resonate and drive action across all parts of your business, not just within IT?